When my wife and I bought our farm just outside a sleepy suburban town, I thought I had finally found peace. The rolling fields, the wide open skies, and the quiet mornings filled with birdsong were everything I had dreamed of after decades of serving in Washington. What none of the neighbors knew, and what I didn't bother advertising, was that I wasn't just another farmer trying to live quietly. I was the sitting director of the Federal Aviation Administration. I had spent my life regulating air travel, overseeing safety standards, and making sure America's skies were respected and secure. But in this little corner of the country, I just wanted to plant corn, raise some cattle, and live a life free of bureaucracy. Of course, the local HOA had other plans. At first, their antics were the usual nonsense. Letters complaining about my barn not matching the neighborhood aesthetic, demands that I pay dues even though my property wasn't legally within their HOA, and passive-aggressive comments about how my tractor made too much noise. I ignored them. I had fought senators, airline lobbyists, and international aviation disputes. An HOA was hardly worth my time, but then things escalated. One morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I looked out my window and nearly dropped my coffee. A crew of contractors was carving a strip of land straight through the western edge of my property, laying asphalt across my pasture, tearing up my fencing and flattening the soil. By the time I got out there, furious and demanding answers, a smug woman in a pastel sweater, Karen, the HOA president of course, stood in front of a bulldozer like she owned the place. "This is the future of our community," she announced, waving her hands toward the destruction. "A private runway. Our residents deserve luxury, and this will increase property values. Since your farm is adjacent, we've appropriated part of your land." I was stunned. Appropriated? You mean trespassed? This is my farm. You can't just pave a runway through federal farmland without approval. Karen smirked. "Oh, please. We voted on it in the HOA. The majority rules. If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't live here." I almost laughed in her face. I could see she had no idea who she was talking to. But instead of unleashing my credentials immediately, I let her dig her own grave. For weeks, they worked day and night, building what they thought was their golden project. The HOA poured their funds into hiring engineers, paving the runway, and even ordering private hangars. They bragged in their meetings that they were about to become the premier airpark community in the state. The kicker? They hadn't filed a single permit with the FAA. Runways, even private ones, fall under federal regulation. They require inspections, environmental impact studies, and most importantly, authorization from my agency. Without it, they weren't just building illegally, they were committing a federal crime. And I, of all people, had the authority to shut them down. So I let them finish. I watched silent as they held a grand opening ceremony with champagne and speeches about how visionary they were. I watched as Karen strutted down the new strip in designer heels, claiming she had personally pioneered aviation in our community. They even invited local news to cover their so-called achievement. That night, I made one phone call. Within 24 hours, FAA inspectors and federal marshals rolled into town. The look on Karen's face when the convoy pulled up was priceless. "What is this?" she demanded as the agents walked the length of the runway, taking measurements and snapping photos. "This," I finally said, stepping forward and pulling out my badge, "is a federal investigation. You have built an unauthorized airstrip across private farmland and attempted to operate an airport without permits, oversight, or environmental clearance. That's not just a violation, it's a threat to national airspace safety." Karen's smugness evaporated. She stammered, "Wait, who even are you to say that?" I showed her the ID, Director of the Federal Aviation Administration. Her jaw dropped so fast I thought it might hit the runway. Over the next week, the fallout was glorious. The FAA declared the runway illegal and unsafe, issuing a cease and desist order effective immediately. Federal marshals padlocked the hangars. Contractors were fined. The HOA was slapped with millions in penalties for environmental damage, illegal construction, and airspace violations. And because they had paved over part of my property without consent, I filed a civil suit on top of it. The runway, once their crown jewel, sat empty, chained off, and useless. The residents who had invested in the project turned on Karen and her board like vultures. The HOA crumbled under lawsuits, bankruptcies, and federal oversight. What was supposed to make them rich and glamorous instead destroyed their community. As for me, I had the runway ripped up and the land restored. The asphalt was ground back into gravel, the soil replenished, and the pastures replanted. My cattle returned to grazing where the so-called luxury airstrip once stood. Peace returned to my farm. But I didn't stop there. I issued a formal notice to the town. Any future attempts to construct air facilities within 20 miles of my land would require direct federal review. If they so much as tried to land a Cessna without clearance, they'd be facing the full weight of the FAA. Months later, Karen approached me in the grocery store, her once perfect hair frazzled, her HOA presidency stripped away, and her reputation in tatters. She muttered something about me ruining her dream. I just smiled and said, "The sky isn't your playground, Karen. It belongs to the people, and I'm the one who keeps it safe." That was the last time she ever bothered me. In the end, the HOA learned a hard lesson. You don't mess with federal law, and you definitely don't build a runway on the farm of the man who runs the FAA.